All right, here we are. Looks like people are rolling in. So, Friday the 13th, boys and girls, Friday the 13th.
Good
You
movie.
guys, no, that's
Which
the
one?
name.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies now.
That's
I feel
true.
like.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
You guys superstitious at all?
No.
No, not really. We had a bunch of we had some really odd coincidences growing up with the family. Just odd things that happened in the family on Friday the 13th for a while, but just not really. Could happen on the 14th too. So just don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I'm not superstitious really in any aspects of life, but especially not about the Friday the 13th thing or 13th floors or 13 anything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, same here. I don't think I'm overly superstitious. Unless we're talking about Gerblins, but that's a different story altogether.
Gerblins is a whole different thing. Yeah. I did used to use 13 for my number when I played baseball though, because just why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about scary movies? You guys have any scary movies you like to watch on the 13th or just in any time in general? The 13th usually makes me think of obviously scary movies because of Friday the 13th, the movie.
Yeah, I'm not a big horror movie fan in general. My wife and my oldest daughter, that's their thing to do together. They love it. I've always considered scary movies to be comedy. I'm always the one who's just sitting there like watching it, going, "Why would you ever do that? This is ridiculous. This is the most ridiculous. The person's about to get their head cut off. That's about to happen." Like, I'm the guy who ruins every scary movie. My wife refuses to watch them with me. Like, if there's even a remote, every once in a while she'll forget and she'll be like, "Hey, do you want to?" You know what? Never mind. No,
you're gonna ruin it for everyone.
Yeah. I just have too much fun during them. I don't get scared by them.
So you see every scary movie like the Progressive car commercial, know what I'm talking about, where the kids are trying to get away and they're in a car, but they choose to go in the tool shed with the chainsaws.
Yeah. Like, let's go in the car. Like, I laugh pretty. When I was a kid, I was a fan. I loved Stephen King when I was a kid. And any Stephen King book and movie and stuff like that, I was a big fan of and stuff. But yeah, I grew out of it.
I like the really goofy horror. I think kind of for the same reason, but I like when it's supposed to be goofy. Like some of the like Cronenberg movies. I mean, I don't know if you guys, you're talking like Scanners and Videodrome, things like that. Just kind of weird horror. I really like those. But yeah, if it's supposed to be scary, it's kind of like,
I don't watch a lot of scary movies either now. Kind of like what Eric was saying though. Growing up, my granny, when she was still with us, that was kind of my thing to do with her. We'd watch scary movies. And she'd always sneak and let me watch movies my parents wouldn't watch when I was over at her house, and we'd watch scary movies together. That was always pretty fun. I was just telling you guys, I have to repeat this because I thought it was funny that I just was telling Eric before he came in here. I watched Get Out, which is a Jordan Peele movie. From Key and Peele, and I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting. He can go from comedy to horror and do such a good job. And then Eric said,
yeah, I said, well, it's pretty relatable since all horror movies are comedies.
So we got a question real quick here from the audience. So on who signed my basketball? That's actually a basketball signed by the 1996 University of Kentucky basketball team. They won the championship that year, and I got that as a Christmas gift the following year from my old man, and cherished it ever since.
Great team.
Great team. One of my favorites. Yeah. All right, I think we got people here. I think it's Friday the 13th. We better just roll before something bad happens. All right, so we just got back from DEFCON. That was a lot of fun. I don't know. It was cool to me. I was just super happy to get to see the team. And even though Pinky didn't get a go, we missed him dearly. But most of our team was there. And I don't know how you felt, Eric, but to me, it was just so awesome, man, to be back together with everybody.
Yeah, DEFCON was cool. I mean, DEFCON was kind of one of those excuses to get back together with people we haven't seen in forever. And then do that whole thing. DEFCON itself was limited. It was 30% in person, at least in person participation this year, it was interesting. It was kind of a weird thing. You know, last year they did it was all virtual, and that was weird. And then this year it was a little different too, but it's good to go out, kind of get back into things, pretend like we're normal for a little bit. And with the overwhelming or the looming kind of obviously COVID stuff, the increased Delta variant spikes and stuff. So, trying to enjoy yourself and pretend like life is normal while the rest of the time being as careful as possible and trying to distance yourself and things like that. So,
yep, for sure. I know people may be wondering, like, what were some of the best talks and things like that, and I'll go and answer that. Like, I don't know. We didn't really participate in any talks or workshops. We were mainly in our rooms working and CTF, and had a lot of fun and a bunch of different CTF competitions, and had some success there. That was super cool. But I did do something for everybody who's here. Portswigger put out an article today of their top talks from Black Hat and DEF CON. I did start to read through that. I didn't get through it all, but I figure we'll share the notes. We'll kick that out to you guys. One cool thing, I think that all the DEF CON talks are going to be available for free, right? For anyone, even if you weren't a DEF CON badge holder this year. I think they're putting those talks up, so you will be able to hopefully get a review some of that stuff. And I know Black Hat's releasing some of their stuff too. So share this link with you, check those repos out, see if there's cool stuff. And maybe next week, once we have a little more time to digest, I know it's been a burn for me, man. And like going from Pacific time back to Eastern time, it took me a few days to catch back up. So maybe between now and next month, we'll have a little time to dig into some of these talks and can bring you guys some of our favorites next month.
Yeah, I don't know how you did it, man. I went from Las Vegas to Reno. That was just a straight northern flight, and I felt exhausted after the whole thing. So
I mean, yeah, same. I was walking from my shed to the house. Just too much.
Yeah, my day return trip was, we got up at 7:30, 8ish, something like that on Monday to pack up the suite, make sure everything was clean and all that. And then I ended up getting home a little after 1 a.m. and I was still on Pacific time. So, I couldn't go to sleep till like 3 a.m. Monday, and I had to work Tuesday. So Tuesday was not fun. Wednesday was a little better. And today I feel pretty good again. I went to bed at like 11 o'clock last night. So that was awesome.
I'll tell you one thing that's different about doing a con when we still are in a pandemic is that there's, there's such a thing as con card or con flu, right? Like every time you leave a con, you always feel sick. You always got something, some bug. Now everybody just feels like we all got COVID. We don't actually have any symptoms, right? But you feel a little tired, feel a little whatever, normal con flu thing, and now you're just like, wait, what happened?
Yeah, wait, should I be more concerned this year?
I take my temperature like every few hours just to make sure,
Yeah, luckily no symptoms for me other than just fatigue right now. So keeping my fingers crossed we weren't exposed. I felt like we were in the perfect place to be exposed for sure. So yeah. But one thing I noticed about DEF CON we did want to talk about today was the marketing. Not DEF CON marketing or Black Hat specific. Yeah, that was a lot of the vendors at Black Hat, right? As soon as we hopped off the plane, I was like, why is there all these cyber ads? And then it's like, oh yeah.
You had to get off the plane. We were on the south, because we were on Southwest, Kyle and I flying down, and we had gotten on the Southwest Wi-Fi to like watch, the shows they do for free, and every advertisement was cyber through Southwest as well.
Oh wow!
All of them, all the way on the plane, we were getting it. Then we got off, and it was the same advertisements all around us. It was like, oh okay,
yeah. The one thing that really stuck out to me on a lot of the ads I see, and we're not here to call out any specific vendors, right? We're not going to name these companies. I think we all agree on that, but it's like easy button security, right? That seemed to be a focus. The big one that I think everybody on our team was talking about, that everyone's seen, you couldn't miss it if you were there, was undefeated in the fight against ransomware. And we all had a chuckle at that, because I mean, if you're advertising you're undefeated against ransomware, well, how are you backing that up? Number one, but number two, you're really putting a target on your back. You're really putting a target on your back for all those customers who've already invested in your product when you do something like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting statement to make in general. I mean, I feel like in advertising these days, we've got just statements that kind of get made. It's actually really funny here. Let me back up, because when we were leaving the airport, there was a billboard on the way out heading to like the highway, right, to whatever, and it was a billboard for like a mail review or something like that, right? Like it doesn't even matter. What made me laugh was that the billboard said probably the best mail review in Vegas.
Probably, yeah, I love it.
And I was cracking up at it. I was like, that's refreshing, man, because everybody just wants to say like our thing 100% fixes your problem. Our thing is the best thing you'll ever find. And marketing is always about that. And that was especially coming out of just seeing all these advertisements for Undefeated and ransomware or whatever it might be. That one made me laugh. Like we need a little bit more I think just humbleness maybe in our things. Just like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good against ransomware. I'll be honest,
Yeah, I'll be honest, it does a pretty good job.
might not be perfect, but it's okay. Yeah, it's fine.
I'd buy a product that said pretty good,
Yeah, I'm not into mail review, but if I was trying to find a mail review show and they said they were probably the best, I'd be like, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I had to go through since we were talking about this, and like I looked at some of the different ads from different vendors and stuff, and I wrote down some of my favorites. And by favorites, I mean, the same reason we're laughing at Undefeated against ransomware. They're to be laughed at. One is attack protection on autopilot. And it seems like that's a recurring theme in a lot of stuff, right? Like, hey, we're going to give you something so you don't have to worry about security. Security is a tool. We're going to give you this tool, and guess what? You can go do whatever you want now. Fire your security team. You got the tool.
Yeah, that's totally how it works. I mean, that's why we have an instant response program here, right? That's how it works.
Yeah, I think we all had a laugh. We're kind of talking about what we're going to talk about, on the show today. And what'd you say, Pink? Like, I don't know if we can let this information out. We're not going to have a job anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we can tell people that there's an easy button that we're just scamming them.
I was just gonna say it's unfortunate, right? Because we already know how the industry is in general. But I mean, like, let's be honest, all three of us on this call and many other people out there have met so many people in the industry who really do legitimately just think they can buy a solution, right? And we know that that's not true. We know that it comes from somewhere else. It comes from training. It comes from having the right staff and preparing for things, preparedness in general, right? But it's unfortunate there are some people out there who think that, and then we got so many people preying on that, just like, hey, buy this thing, you can throw money at this and it'll fix your problem.
Right.
Yeah, there's a reason why we kind of call it snake oil, right? I mean, there's a reason that's how snake oil worked, right? You got arthritis, headaches, gout, bald tires, whatever, here's some snake oil, it'll work for you. So
right.
Yeah,
it's
unfortunate. Snake oil
unfortunate.
to help me with my back though, so it's
I mean
Eric had an unfortunate back injury moments before the show today. So if he's grimacing, you all know why now.
Yeah, he's a trooper.
Yeah, if they go rambling for a bit, you just see me in the corners, you're like just kind of hurting, just ignore it. Okay, it's gonna be fine.
Yep. Yeah, I guess the big takeaway from there is like, and I hope everyone in our audience is aware of that, is be very cautious of easy button security. Tools that advertise they're the one thing you need for security, just like Eric said, it's so much more than that. And I think that's the goal of our show, is to educate you guys, so you do understand that more. And hopefully we've reached that point by now, but hey, maybe there's new people here that don't understand that, and we just wanted to reiterate that a little bit. And even though I didn't see this ad at Las Vegas, I know Pinky, you had mentioned something we talk about a lot on here is protecting your backups through an air gap. Right. And maybe you're seeing some solutions that are seeing that trend now. And so they're trying to advertise they are that solution, even though they maybe aren't that solution. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this kind of came up. I mean, even before we were thinking about doing this marketing talk, is we kind of got a lot of calls and things and requests from clients wanting to talk about backups, and that's great. I'm always happy to talk about backups. I know it's the most exciting topic in the world, and everybody gets super pumped about it. But and what really hit me was that we were getting a lot of calls and people saying, "Hey, I've got this company proposing this air gap backup solution. Do you want to review it?" And usually it's just, "Hey, tell me a little bit about it," right? Just give me a description. And it was like, yeah, so it's air gapped. It's on this other device across the network, but they're encrypted and it uses a different account. So that's an air gap, right? It's like, No, that's not at all. You know, you're still connected. You can still be compromised. And so what really hit me was I don't expect everybody to always just think like we do about this stuff, but when you've got companies out there, like big name companies preying on people and saying this is an air gap backup solution, it is just absolutely not. You know, it really hits home for us. It bothers us a lot. So that was kind of why we were talking about that. Again,
Yeah.
not going to call anybody out specifically, but just be very aware of that. If it's connected, it's not air gapped. That's it.
And I would recommend for all our listeners too, if you're thinking about implementing a solution and you're unsure of that's going to meet the criteria we talk about, shoot us an email. You know,
Yeah.
we're happy to answer questions and help people for sure.
Yeah. On that subject of air gap, we were just kind of talking about earlier today, was a few years ago, Oscar and I had sat down and we're talking about some stuff that was a different protocol to connect different networks, right? You'd have your IoT network and you had your normal, corporate network, and to gap it out to make it safe so that you couldn't get to the IoT devices, there was this other connection that you would establish between a device on one network and a device on the other network, and they would communicate over a different medium, protocol, everything like that. And so that was their solution to being able to say, hey, that's air gapped, kind of, right? Like that takes that network completely off your network, is what was being said. Takes that network completely off your network. It is not on the same network. And I was like, okay, but so how's it implemented? Well, we all know that they have to be networked in the way, so they need to be able to communicate, but we don't want to have them on the same network. So we have this other thing that's in between. So it works seamlessly. And as far as both of them are concerned, they're on the network and they're able to talk to each other, but they're just not on the same network, you see, because there's this other hardware layer in between. And it's just like,
yeah,
you realize that if you make it so seamless that we can just do normal network traffic over this thing between the two different networks, that's nothing, right? Like, I don't care if you're laser beaming it to the other side of the building. If it communicates over IPv6 or IPv4, TCP/IP stuff, if I can just communicate with it, the ports normally, and connect to it normally, as an attacker, I have no clue that you even implemented that security product, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Seamless, bro.
Yeah.
But you can, but you can pay a bunch of money to deploy that in your environment and keep your IoT safe.
Mm-hmm. It will technically be on different networks.
Yeah,
sure.
not the same network.
Yeah. And there's a new protocol in between, but it's an invisible protocol. So don't worry about it. Everything's still going to work.
Comment from Anthony in chat. If you focus on only a tool and think you'll be good, you're the one that's the tool.
Hey, I like that. Yeah. Thanks for that, Anthony. All right, cool. So I think that kind of leads into another thing here. Like, that was an IoT solution we were looking at, right, Eric? And I remember that meeting, we were chatting about that a little bit. And I think this is something I wanted to talk about today with you guys, is just IoT pen testing in general. I know here at FRSecure this year, we've seen an uptick in requests for us to test your IoT devices, your SCADA devices, your ICS devices, whatever you want to call them, whatever acronym they are. They're all, to me, the same thing generally in the end. And I see a lot of our competition in the market advertising right now that they do those tests. And so kind of thought it'd be good to say, let's take a step back a little bit and talk about, what that means and what we believe you should really be focusing on. I'll say right now, and Eric, I'd like you to expand on this too, because you definitely have a lot more information experience here with this than I do. But one reason we don't actively target, running exploits or vulnerability checks against IoT devices is because they're not very stable, right? They're susceptible to DOSing, to going offline, to failing, because I don't know, there's a lot of archaic architecture involved with these devices.
Yeah, I'd say not only that, but even if they are stable, that when you take a look at a lot of devices, you take a look at especially infrastructure or healthcare or whatever, these devices that are in a lot of situations, when it comes to CIA triad, as we kind of talked about, a couple of days ago, availability is primary, number one, right? And the ability to, even potentially take them offline or shut them down or break something in the process, it's a big deal. You don't want to do that, and you want to definitely be ready for it if it's going to happen. So yeah, testing and throwing kind of blind tests at some of these things can be very risky in some situations. Right.
And another thing I like to bring up to people when they ask that is, if we're testing a web application, what do we do every time? we're not going to test your production application because of that similar risk, right? And so when we look at IoT environment, it's like, hey, do you have a test environment for IoT or your ICS system? No, it's typically not possible for people to be able to do that, right? We're not talking about virtual appliances that run and, on a server somewhere on the back end. Like, these are typically physical devices that cost a lot of money. They're very difficult to even deploy in the beginning. So the idea that people could have the ability, the infrastructure, the cash flow, all that to stand up a simulation environment just for testing within their organization that actually mimics their real production environment, like, it's not very likely. Even if they have a test environment, some test systems, it's not very likely it's going to mimic that production environment.
Yeah. I mean, I will say we do test production in a web application if we have to,
Sure.
but yeah, it's not a desired effect generally, because a lot of times you have to be careful about how you do things. And by being careful, you're missing things.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the world of IoT, I mean, obviously, if you're an IoT device maker, it's fine. You can send out copies of, versions of your device, set them up for configuration, testing, and stuff like that. But if we're talking about your environment that you have a bunch of different things set up, yeah, like, Oscar just said, that's a difficult thing to clone. We have done some testing in the past where we've had people send us a version of a device that was deployed in production in their environments to hack at locally, do all that kind of attacking locally that might be a little concerning, might topple something over, and then use the knowledge we gained from that to try to do some stuff internally. But even then, I do think that some of that's missing the point.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's totally missing the point. That's where, I'm hoping we get to here is, again, when we look at like Florida water specifically, right? Everybody thought about like SCADA. But the reality was, it wasn't specifically that SCADA network or that SCADA device that was vulnerable. It was a lack of segmentation that led to that attack, right? And so that's what we really like to push here, is that rather than saying, hey, let's go bang on these devices, which are inherently vulnerable for the most part, and there are statistics around that. I'm putting a blog out with some data around this and stuff like that after we finish the podcast today. But it's unfortunate, but we do have to accept that a lot of these devices are just going to be insecure by nature, by default. Not all, but most. And if we know that and we accept that, then what can we do to actually secure those devices? Get them off our network, right? We don't allow that untethered access, especially. We segment that to the highest level possible, and really just, default to that theory of least privilege, right? And least access, default deny everything. And so, what I did, I started thinking about, like, I looked at the OWASP top 10 for IoT, and then just kind of went through those things and thought about them piece by piece. Like, the number one thing is hard-coded passwords. Like, you don't need us to pen test to know that, right? It's typically going to be a vulnerability that has already been published, something that's been disclosed. And even if we find that in a pen test, like, what do you think the vendor is going to do about that? Probably not much, And I'm not going to go through the whole top 10 here with you on the call today. We don't have the time to do that, but it's a very recurring theme if you really dig into that OWASP top 10, that there's a lot of things that, sure, you can find in a penetration test, or that you probably would already know. But even more importantly, if you find those things, in most cases, it's not going to be possible for that vendor to even fix those things. If they even choose to accept that vulnerability and work to fix that, it's going to be a very long time before they can fix that. And so our solution is separate and segment those devices as best as possible.
Yeah. And I don't think we're like necessarily, saying, oh, the device manufacturers out there are just doing a terrible job or anything like that. I mean, if you look at all the stuff we battle on operating systems daily, and how much development, how much time they've had to perfect that, how much research goes into those things, you know what I mean? And how much we're constantly running into issues. I mean, it's to be expected on these things that have a little bit less, maybe working behind them, visibility, time and use, stuff like that. You're going to have these issues. You're going to be a little bit behind on issues and things like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think I put a disclaimer in my blog that says, hey, for everyone, I'm not implying these suppliers are neglectful in the situation. Patching firmware, software, and systems that are responsible for securing human life is not an easy task. And then on top of that, something you were talking about yesterday, Eric, was like the regulations that you even have to go through to change that. It costs money for people to fix those things. So on top of like having that ultimate responsibility of protecting someone's volatile life, on top of that, like, it's a very difficult process to get those updates are even approved, specifically in medical world. So yeah.
One of the ways I like to look at IoT pen testing too is that, like you said, it's not like we're saying, you know, you're going to say things like you just assume that it's vulnerable, and that feels very foreign because you don't want to just assume. But you should honestly be assuming something's vulnerable in every aspect of your network and a planning for that, right? Preparing for that. But it's a weird thing to just say we're going to have this segment of stuff or this whole part of our industry or business or whatever that is gonna be vulnerable, more so maybe than normal things, and we just have to accept that. But if you look at it from like other industries, let's look at like payment card industry, right? We consider credit card data to be a sensitive thing. There's no getting around that. If I have your credit card information, that's a problem. There's nothing that can be done about that credit card information. I mean, there's things we could try to do to protect it from getting into your hands, but at the end of the day, if I have it, it's sensitive, right? And so we treat it that way. We know that it's that way. And instead of doing pen tests to see if I can make a charge with your credit card number if I get it, instead what we're looking at is, can we get access to that environment, segment that environment, control that environment, make it very difficult or impossible to get very difficult to get that environment, and then test to see if that's the case, test to see if we can get into those segments, right? Why aren't we treating IoT and everything else the same way? Like, these things are sensitive at the end of the day. So we got to segment them. We got to make sure that it's difficult to get to them, that we know how you get to them and control that, and we're monitoring that.
Yep. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that's our stance as a whole. If anyone on the call has reached out to us about this testing, that's probably what we've told you. Something similar to that. This is how we'll approach that. And don't fall for the snake oil of other clients or competitors in our space telling you that, yeah, we're going to do a badass IoT test on your devices. Really sit back and think about the value and what you need to understand and what your goals are to get from that engagement. And I think it's going to lead you right back to what we're talking about here. Cool. Anything else you guys want to chat about on that one before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's well covered. It's kind of back to the whole a lot of snake oil, right? Just when you can do some fundamental things. So
yep, for sure. Cool. So moving on to a little bit of news that happened this week. The Accenture incident. I'm sure most everyone has heard about that by now. I think that news broke on Wednesday, I believe, the 11th. A little background on Accenture, Fortune 500 company. $44 billion in revenue last year. And this is the most, to me, interesting statistic. Their client base includes 91 of the Fortune Global 100. Ouch. It's a lot of data. Yeah, a lot of data. And I know at this point it was reported that the demand was $50 million. I think we know they didn't pay that demand at this point, but that would have been the biggest ransom payment ever. If that had been paid. So yeah, well, let's tear this one apart a little bit.
Yeah, just the ransom payments. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those later, but that is an interesting thing, right? It's huge. The other one here too, this was Lockbit 2.0, new version of Lockbit out there. We've worked a few Lockbit cases. It's interesting. It's an odd, it's kind of a strange ransomware. It's a self-spreader generally, but it was kind of not great at it. Like, it failed a lot, which was great for us as investigators, because we come in, we find the ones that failed, and then we start tracing things back and get a little more data out of it. The newer version, though, does some stuff with group policy, put some things in place, get rid of Defender and a couple of other things, as well as it does a really fun printer bomb. It throws the ransom note out to any network printers it can find. So I thought that was kind of fun. So I mean, that's a little bit more about Lockbit than Accenture, but as we were discussing earlier, not a ton of details out there about what's going on with Accenture. I think maybe Eric had some more that he had found about kind of what happened, what was going on with it.
And there's not much, like I was saying earlier. It feels like when you look into it, at least at the current state, it's a couple facts, right? Information is out there that they were breached on Lockbit 2.0 site. Accenture come out with their response to it, basically saying, yeah, it happened, but things were generally unaffected. We were able to back up, we were able to restore, right? So
I got to give them kudos on two things there, like on that point, right? One, this happened on the 30th. They actually went public with it in a pretty short order, and that takes a lot of prep on that back end to be able to prepare and to be able to go public and share that information. So respect for doing that. And then second, like, they had backups, and they had backups that were protected, so they were able to secure. You know, we don't know the details right now, but for me, I mean, I'm happy to see that.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, being able to recover.
You know, we don't know what, you know, obviously the attackers are saying that there's some pretty sensitive information that was breached and stolen, right? And Accenture, I think, is pretty much saying, no, you know, that's not the case. Some data was released, and so far it doesn't look sensitive. It's difficult to know how that'll go. I mean, if you know, the breach happened the way it happened, and they legitimately didn't get any sensitive data, you know, I guess time will tell. But if that was the case, that also might speak to some good segmentation too, you know.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of what I was thinking too, Eric. That's a really good point there about segmentation, right? Even just segmentation of data, not just segmentation of networks and things like that, right? Least privilege and a lot of the stuff that we don't see often, right? You know, we'll see these attacks, and they got 6 terabytes of data, and there's tons of sensitive stuff in there. It's rare that we see one where they got 6 terabytes of data and looks like marketing materials, you know. So yeah, I'm happy for them that it sounds like they maybe had some good things in place, possibly.
Yeah,
it's important. I think we've said many times before, we'll say it again, is that it's not if, it's when type of thing, right? Companies do get breached, it's going to happen. I think we have to be careful not to like just be like, well, they got hit, so they're terrible or anything like that. Time will tell how that all came out, but so far it's hopefully good.
I mean, yeah, sure, man? Because I heard there was a way to be undefeated against ransomware. So I don't know that I buy this from you.
There was an article shared by one of our listeners that we're going to unpack a little bit next, but it mentions some of those same things. I think it's pretty interesting there. And they said there's 2 types of businesses: those who have been hacked and those who will be hacked. And it's an unfortunate reality right now. And so I think that's why a recurring theme you hear us talk about is preparing and having a response capability, assessing yourself regularly, knowing where your deficiencies are, and having a plan to work to fix those and improve those. The one thing though about Accenture too, I wanted to bring up before we go on to the next topic is the insider threat. So I know that Lockbit 2.0, since we've seen DarkSide and Are Evil kind of go away for a bit, it seems like they're ramping up, and they are actively recruiting from reports we've seen. And the scary thing is, their reports, they're actively recruiting corporate insiders now, and that's a new angle that has been publicly shared. I'm not saying that's never happened before with another group. It likely has, but this is one of the first public reports I've seen of a group saying, yeah, we're looking for corporate insiders now. To me, that's pretty scary.
I've not seen any other recruiting, but I know, and I don't remember all the story offhand. I didn't think to grab a link to it, but did this happen with Tesla recently? Wasn't there somebody that they had offered a Tesla employee a pretty hefty sum to go and drop ransomware in Tesla?
Yeah, I do remember reading that article. Yeah.
So do you guys?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, do you guys think we're gonna see a paradigm shift? Are attackers going to start shifting toward more of these, inside resources that can aid them for quick deployment, quick attack?
It's tough to say. I mean, it would certainly be an effective method if they could do it. I don't know. That may get shut down pretty quick with, people just realizing, hey, I'm going to go to jail kind of thing, because it's going to be a lot easier to prosecute somebody that's here and not have to be extradited and things like that. But certainly would be effective. I think they're going to try it more. Say that. And
I'm just going to throw a curveball here too, but these actors are smart people, and I think they have to understand that retribution is a real thing if they do start, recruiting these inside actors. But I do also think sometimes it's possible to be able to develop methods for those inside actors where it's not necessarily traceable to something that was, ill intent. How many accidental breaches do we see, man? Like where somebody, got hit by malvertising, somebody got that phishing email, something like that. And we're like, we always have compassion for those people. And that event turned into a ransom attack. Like how easy or how hard would it be for us to detect a staged event like that? If we're relying on the honesty of that person. They say, shoot, I didn't know that was a phishing email that I, downloaded and ran this beacon on. I didn't know that link I clicked was malicious, but when in reality, it could have been a pre-planned event. So I think it throws a big curveball for forensicators.
Great point. Yeah, really great point.
Yeah, I think we rely too right now that the channels in which I think for a lot of these groups and stuff like that to reach out to people and try to solicit them to, come to their side in some way or to do something like that has been limited, in the past. I think one of the interesting aspects of this whole kind of change in the way we're seeing things go down is how more bold and open attackers as groups and as businesses kind of are becoming, right? How bold and open they're becoming, how there's just, job postings basically now, right? It's just like we're hiring pen testers, type of thing.
Yeah.
And we're looking for these types of inside actors. I think the more they become available, the more we're going to see people that maybe, I don't want to say like they're not smart people, but I mean, the more people you can expose that message to and give that ability to, there are going to be some seeds in that are either bad seeds or they're just not thinking about the repercussions. Maybe, we rely on generally so far the general people who have the ability to contact, reach out, and actually make a relationship with these people are probably intelligent enough to know that they'd be screwing themselves in a lot of ways, or they'd be doing it some way other way, right? But I mean, people don't always necessarily think the repercussions or think they can get caught. So
yep. I think the other risk we have to accept along with that too is as we see the profitability of these ransom actors continue to increase, right? And I think there's some numbers we're going to talk about later, but that means they got more money to pay people. And then it gets to a point where they're paying people enough money that they do the risk versus reward, and they're going to be able to recruit more bad actors just through financially driven motivations.
Yeah, absolutely. And realistically for the company, right, at the end of the day, even if you're able to prosecute that person or whatever, doesn't change the fact that you got hit and you're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. So yeah, it's certainly going to be, like I said, it's going to be an effective method if they do continue. And yeah, like you said, Oscar, talking about some of these bigger payments and things we're going to talk about here in a bit, it's a lot of money to put in front of somebody that maybe, hey, maybe you don't like your job all that much. It's kind of rough, been a rough year, that kind of thing. And it's a big fat stack of cash to think about.
Yep, sure is. So we'll keep this story in mind too. I'm sure there's going to be more details come out in the coming weeks. And so if we get relevant information for you guys, be sure and pass that along. So let's move into some of those statistics. And so one of our listeners kicked over a report that was put out by the Howden Group. And I'll be honest, I didn't get a chance to go through word by word in the entire report. I will say it's a good report. There's a lot of good stats in there, a lot of good data, things that I think go along with things that we've talked about on here before and we believe. So there was a lot of good value in there. We'll share that link to everyone. And thank you for sending that over. And also, we want to encourage people, like, if you guys have something you want us to check out or review or talk about, send us an email. We'll make sure we'll try our best to get that added to the agenda for that show. And if not, if we can't, we're always open to a conversation with you to talk through that. But to me, this is kind of a report, like, to summarize the TLDRs. Hey man, insurance, they've been getting taken to the cleaners, and here's a bunch of data to prove that, and insurance is going to change, right? The big stats that stuck out to me is 170% increase in ransomware events since Q1 2019. That's a short time and a big increase. That same time period, a 405% increase in the average ransom payment.
Huge.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of scary stats in there. If you want to read that, there's a lot of good stuff in there to give you a fright about how powerful, how strong the ransomware economy is. And we just have to equate that to money is power in this game. And so the more, financially driven organization, the more finances that they're able to achieve, but just like we were talking about, they're able to spread their footprint, get more people, get more resources, get better at their attacks. And so, unfortunately, I think that, it's hit insurance really, really hard, right? And I think there's a stat in there, like, showing that insurance companies, they paid out most of their claims. Like, it was like 95% of all claims for the U.S. were paid out. And, I think now they're taking a step back and looking at that and saying, should we have paid all those claims because we got taken to the cleaners? And what can we do to validate our clients, our policyholders, are focusing on doing the right things before we give them the policy? And I think there's a lot of change that's going to be coming soon for policyholders. I think it's going to be critically important too for all of our listeners here to really understand those changes, be able to be more proactive. And that's something we push anyway. So I can't say I disagree with anything there. But what I do disagree with that I've seen in the wild, this just happened today. Got an email from one of our analysts, our consultants, and one of our clients, their insurance policy holder had told them they have to install a specific EDR tool, and they told them it had to be one of two vendors, and it was an HP tool. I don't remember what the other tool was, but they said, hey, you have to install EDR and it has to be one of these two vendors right here. And to me, that was rather alarming because those two tools typically don't fall at the top of my top 10 list, number one. But number two, why should your provider have the authority to tell you which tool you use? Even if you have a better solution in place, like it doesn't matter. They're telling you have to install these tools. And so for me, I see a relationship opportunity there for that cyber insurer, probably getting some kickback from a vendor for further pushing their tool, who really cares how good it is on the backside, or who even really knows, and they're putting more money in their bank to probably try to make up for some of these losses. To me, that's gross. I think it's just gross.
Disgusting. Yeah, I mean it's terrible. And yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we're always going to be more on the be prepared, get ahead of this stuff kind of thing. And so we, and when we've been seeing this, we've seen a lot of requests from clients in the last few weeks, few months, asking these types of questions. My insurance provider needs this. My insurance provider says I have to have a ransomware playbook by Monday, or they're canceling my plan. That kind of thing. And I think that's only going to increase. And, it makes sense. It's tough, but I'm sort of happy to see it. It's a tough spot for a lot of people to be in, but I am happy to see that we're making some progress, however that's happening. So.
Yeah, I'm incredibly happy to see the progress. Like, I know some of the things they're looking at right now is MFA solutions, making sure you're implementing MFA on all your publicly available logons. Awesome. I'm happy to see that. Even the idea of implementing EDR, having, some sort of tooling in your environment for detection, making sure that detection service is up to date and so on. Great. I think you should be doing that. I know they're enforcing assessments for people too. Awesome. I think you should be doing all those things. What I don't like is saying you got to do it with this vendor. Do those things, start to treat it like any other regulatory body, meet this criteria, and we'll insure you based upon your risk score. You think about what we do with Security Studio, like they're insuring based upon that score we get from an assessment. Like, I get that logic. I think that makes sense. I don't like locking people down to specific vendors. And that's something we've even talked about before this change has happened, where some vendors or some providers will only allow you to work with their incident response team. And we've worked cleanup for some of those cases. And I can tell you firsthand why it's a bad idea. So make sure if you're in that space right now, you're preparing for changes. So if you're happy with your provider, reach out to your provider and talk to them about changes that are going to be upcoming. There likely will be some changes, and make sure you're prepared for that. And you agree with how they're implementing those things. I think it's going to be important for everyone. I do have to say one negative thing about that article. I thought overall it was good. There was a lot of good stats in there. I did make some notes though, because there was, I want you guys to respond to this and tell me what you think. There was a QA at the end with David Carmile. He's the CEO of Kelo, that's spelled Kelo. And they're a cyber threat intel company. They really tout some of their dark web capabilities. And they have some SOC services. And so he was asked what is driving the dramatic increase in cyber incidents. And David answered in so many words, the dark web. Dark web.
Sounds legit. Yeah, dark web. Yep. Dark web. Can we say it a couple more times? I wonder if it'll help our search engine optimization. Yeah, no, that's not what's driving this. I'm sure David's a sharp guy, and maybe he just misspoke there. I don't want to get in his head, but I would respectfully disagree.
Especially since the article just touted there was a 405 increase in average ransom payments. What's driving this? Is it the dark web or is it the money? Yeah, it's the money, baby.
It's
Come on.
money, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that's driving all the snake oil, man. I mean,
yeah, and he also recommended that defenders try to exploit those ecosystems and venture into the dark web. And it was just kind of another plug for his company. I get that, you want to sell your stuff, but let's be fair here. The dark web's not driving that. Sure, it is used for a platform for information sharing, but it's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Yeah. Dark web's been made that available in a certain way, pretty much similar to how it already is right now for several years now. I mean, that part hasn't really changed. That ability to share that data in that space in that way has been there now for several years.
Yep.
We're not seeing increases because of some more availability of it. That's not the case at all. We're seeing increases because of the profitability, at least in my opinion.
Yep. I see there is a question. Cliff, we'll make sure when we send out our post notes, we'll have a link to that report so you can all have access to that. I do also want to give a plug to, and Alex is on the call from our team here at FRSecure. Maybe you can tell you guys the dates, but talking about those playbooks that are going to be required to retain insurance for some policy holders. We made those playbooks for you. And so we're going to give those away. Pinky and the rest of the team did a fantastic job working through those playbooks. We picked that over to our marketing team right now. They're working on some drafting and getting those published. And so if we're able to get those published in short order, like, by Monday, we'll include that link here. So you guys can have access to those playbooks and get those. Obviously modify them for your own, right? Make sure they fit your business, but they're a really good start. They're going to help you guys a whole lot. And yeah, we'll get that in your hands ASAP. Even if it's not in the notes when it goes out, we'll send everyone here a link when those go live so you can get that access.
Yeah, it looks like Alex said the 23rd. And yeah, just from having a little insight since I was involved with the process, those are written in a way that they're broad, but there are some good suggestions in there, but it is meant for you to tailor to yourself. You can't just slap your name on it and say that it's your plan, which I'd love to do that for you. But it's one of those things where you're going to have to tailor it a little bit to your environment, but I think it's a pretty good start. So definitely take advantage of those.
You're doing it the wrong way. You need to get them so they can just slap a name on it. We need to say that the best playbooks ever, they stop all problems, and we'll sell them for $50,000 a year.
Well, these playbooks they're undefeated against ransomware, right?
Yeah. business email compromise and lost stolen. But yeah, I mean they're undefeated against all those things so far.
So far, yeah.
So far.
Probably the best playbooks on the web.
Probably the best.
I mean, I appreciate you guys saying that. I can't say that. I mean, that would not be modest of me.
Oh, I want to be careful to say I didn't say that either.
But cool. And a reminder for anybody else out there, I know that our plan is going to be a requirement as well. So make sure you got that. If you don't, get ours, use that to create your own. Again, Pinky and the team did an awesome job on that. I know a lot of folks have told us they've gotten a lot of value out of that. So if you guys aren't aware, you want a copy of that, hit our website. You can find it. If you can't find it, shoot us an email. We'll point you there. And we have to hit this real quick before we go into our hacker tip of the week in the phishing report. But print nightmare, another print nightmare. 0-day vulnerability was released. Yeah,
another print spooler RCES system. CVE 2021. What? 36958 now. But I mean, I think when we talked about this last time, I said like always has been and always will be. I mean, I'm not surprised to see another one come out, and the fact that the other original ones are still kind of not really patched at this point either, not effectively. A lot of issues there still. Same kind of recommendation as before, I think, right?
Yep, for sure. Disable those print spooler services if you can. If you have that option, shut them down. Otherwise, wait for guidance from Microsoft for the next patches. And then, on the flip side, to understand, like we said last time, it's going to require access to that print spooler service from an attacker, which unless you've done something real dumb and put that on the internet, you haven't. I'm sure you haven't. Then they're going to have to be on your network anyway. And at that point, you got bigger problems. Call us and we'll talk on another call.
Yeah. I do wish I could share the awesome graphic that Tim, one of our case managers, made. It was basically the infinity symbol in print nightmare. So print nightmare infinity, it's just going to keep going. Yeah.
There were some real pretty colors in there too.
It was beautiful. It was glorious. So.
All right, cool. Let's go into the hacker tip of the week. What do you got for us, Eric?
You always say of the week, but we only do this once a month. So.
No. In my mind, it's once a week. Time flies over here.
Hacker tip of the year. Yeah. I I wanted to kind of cover something that's
Well,
pretty
first,
simple.
isn't a week part of a month, man? Come on.
Sure.
I'm just
Roll on. I'm sorry. I'll let myself out the back.
All right. I wanted to kind of talk about a subject that is, pretty, for a lot of people who are obviously who are already hacking or in pen testing or something like that are aware of. But I wanted to, I talked to a decent amount of people out there who are either looking to first get started in penetration testing, learning some stuff about hacking security, breaking security, things like that, or a lot of people out there who are, security for a company who just want to learn a little bit more about approaching certain types of vulnerabilities, verifying things in their system, testing their own stuff in their systems. And it's a simple idea of some of the things you can start to do. And one of those things is CTFs, capture the flags, right? I have had conversations with a lot of people out there in a lot of different ways about the effectiveness, the reality, how realistic these things are, how useful they can be. I've had many people tell me that a CTF is nothing like the job, and so it's just pointless, it's worthless, it's a waste of time. And in some cases that's true. They're very broad ranging. Okay, we've heard of CTFs in other parts of life, as a capture the flag, it's a paintball event or a video game thing or something like that. In security or hacking world, it's breaking it into something or cracking the code of something, fixing or finishing a puzzle or figuring out a puzzle and getting a flag rewarded kind of as your achievement, right? There are plenty of them out there that definitely have nothing to do with security really, beyond just kind of some far reaches, maybe some weird encodings and things like that. But there's also, a subset of these things that exist out there that are definitely meant to focus on giving you the ability to try things out, to figure out and enumerate a vulnerability and to exploit that vulnerability and to use that knowledge and to get access to these things, right? Some of these platforms that, like many of you might have heard of, but some people might not have, and that's the people I'm talking to right now, are hacklebox.eu, tryhackme.com. And then there's probably other ones out there too, but those are the big ones, right? These are types of sites where you have systems, you can get into a VPN lab environment, you can try to attack those systems, and there's going to be a vulnerability or a set of vulnerabilities on them. And a lot of times they're set up in a way that there'll be like an initial vulnerability that'll get you from one stage or from like zero access to a little bit of access. Maybe you'll pivot that into a bit more access and then pivot that all the way into root or system administrator, etc. These types of things can really get you the ability to test and learn, kind of in an environment that you might not be able to set up internally. You might not have the funding, the infrastructure or whatever to set up. I'll say this, at FRSecure, we have a lab environment infrastructure that we've set up. Pinky set up quite a bit of it. It's for blue and red team to kind of collaborate and work on things. And that said, we still do a ton of just testing in these other types of environments, right? Those types of labs are useful. Similarly, there's things like VulnHub that'll have vulnerable VMs that you can boot up and you can try to attack those and stuff. But having the ability to specifically target types of vulnerabilities and learn about those is really, really useful if you're looking to get started in the industry, if you're looking to pivot some of your knowledge into a new area to help out at your company and to be able to detect things before you have pen tests, etc. And I think that really a lot of people could gain from that. And I wouldn't shrug it off as a non-realistic situation.
Yeah, I would completely agree to that, man. And I see, looks like Robert shared a link. I haven't tried securityblue.team. I don't know if you have Pink.
No,
I know there is a good blue resource out there. So DEFCON did the 2019 D for CTF is all archived and online now. I know that's one that a lot of us have worked through here. It's good. A lot of good educational opportunity there as well.
D for DFIR, just make for
yes, yeah. And we'll get links into notes too. So when you can't understand my hillbilly words, at least you're going to be able to read them. So
and I'll say that too. Occasionally, that I'm talking about those ones that are labs with virtual machines or boxes that you can attack that have, and a lot of times they are modeled after actual CVEs and you can exploit them. You can Google, you'll find, oh, I have this version of this, there's a CVE for this, and I can do something, and you learn a little bit about those environments. But even the ones that are entirely not that, even the ones that are just puzzles, even the ones that are just, hey, we have this weird encoding or whatever, a lot of times they include things like analyzing a PCAP of some traffic. And there's a lot to be learned there too. If you're in a situation where you're kind of maybe more of a blue teamer, I mean, even as a red teamer, I find a lot of value in that kind of stuff. But being able to analyze, take a look at that, kind of reverse engineer the packets and what's actually happening in that, and what and be able to identify something that's out of the normal. It gives you, I think there's a lot of skill there to be able to take something, define a baseline within it, and then find the anomalies outside of that baseline. So even if it's not necessarily perfectly lined up with your job, the actual activity and the kind of skill set that comes out of it is extremely useful.
Completely agree. Yep.
Yeah.
There's always skills to be learned, man. Even if it's not a one-to-one, you're always going to come out with more skills that will at some point be relatable.
Yeah, just getting your brain in that mindset of like, it may take me 4 steps to get to this answer this puzzle question. It's not a one-to-one, not one step. That just little things like that, just training your brain to work a little differently. I love CTFs, even I think we all do, but even the ones that are a little weird and kind of out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to teams at other companies. I won't name the companies, but I've talked to some teams managers at other companies, and they laughed at the idea of it. It was just like, well, that's not the job. Those are just unrealistic. It's like, okay, I mean, I get that, but at the same time, there's a lot of value in it. If you can't find a way to relate, testing and stressing your brain in certain situations, and sometimes even doing things that definitely directly relate to the vulnerabilities you see and things like that. If you can't relate that to your job, then I feel like you're just maybe doing the wrong job.
I think you're missing the point there. There's so much relation to just like being able to problem solve and, like you said, work through stressful situations. And even if that experience is a completely different technical skill set than you're going to execute your job, your brain's still going to learn how to handle those stressful situations, how to use logic to step through to find a solution. And I don't care who you are and what you're doing, that's relatable for anyone to improve. I will say too, real quick before we move on, that these resources too, I think they're not all free, but they're close to free. Like Hack the Box is what, like $10 maybe, $8.
They both have free options. I wouldn't recommend doing the free option. Just because of some of the difficulties, network overcrowding and stuff like that, if you're on the free versions, but they do have free options.
Yeah, and the paid version is pretty cheap on both those, right? Like $10 or so.
Yeah, I haven't done the Try Hack Me one on the paid side, but Hack the Box, I think it's like 10 euro, so it's like 13 something or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys trade in your Netflix or Hulu subscription for a couple months and learn to pin test and holler at us.
Yeah.
The DEFCON D for CTF I talked about for Blue Team is totally free too. It's an archive. And there's also like CTF time too, right, Eric? That's a good one where you can find some archive CTFs to kind of run through.
Yeah.
Archive list up there. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as, so CTF time tracks kind of live or online actual CTF competitions. If you get to a point that is something you want to do, that's definitely a good place to go. If you're looking for what's generally, when you're starting out, you're looking more for offline CTFs, something that kind of always exists year round. It's not a timed event, stuff like that. And so there's places, We Challenge cutoff, right? That's a place that has a listing of a bunch of different places that have these offline CTFs. Some are better than others, but they can get some good information. The write-ups in the archive on ctftime.org will have write-ups for challenges that were in CTFs. So even if you aren't actively doing those CTFs, you could always go back and read how they were done. A lot of good knowledge about how RSA crypto works and how some of the flaws that could be put into implementations of it and breaking things down can be learned from things like that. So there's a lot of value in some of those things.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Eric. Pinkerman. Phishing Report. What's hot? What's not? What they biting, bro?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of funny. This is a good example of just your brain going in a different direction, right? I mean, think about phishing reports like actual, phishing reports and phishing reports like we're doing them. Just different, things line up, man. So this one, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm getting tired of talking about ransomware. I feel like I say ransomware more times in a week than I probably say my kids' names. But we're going to talk about ransomware, so because it's the hotness. It is what's hot and what they're biting. So a little bit of a sort of new tactics here. All these things have been in place in the past, but we're starting to see more of sort of a quadruple threat when it comes to ransomware. For a long time we're just seeing the encryption, right? You pay to get your files back. We countered that with let's do good backups and get good offline backups. And so obviously there's always going to be this arms race, this evolution of the attack. So then the attackers move on to more of the extortion type thing, right? So not only are we going to encrypt your files, we're going to steal those files before we do it, and then we're going to threaten to release them unless you pay us the money. We're seeing that with Accenture and things like that right now. So the two sort of new-ish ones, these have kind of been around before, but you just don't often see a lot of it together. And the trouble is, these guys are starting to take this escalating approach to, okay, you didn't pay for the key, you didn't pay for the their extortion, your data release. So now we're going to denial of service. So if you've got a public website, your Walmart.com or whatever, you've got something out there, or even just your own services that maybe rely on some sort of public facing interface, they're going to start doing denial of service attacks on those, right? And so we're going to hit you with this traffic and make you inoperable until you pay us the ransom. So that's a newish attack there, or a newish portion of the attack. I'll go over some sort of things we can do to maybe help mitigate these here in just a sec. But and then beyond that, right, the one that we talked about this a little bit a few months ago, I believe, but the harassment techniques. So now they've encrypted your files, they've taken your data, they're threatening to release it, they're potentially hitting you with a denial of service to try to get you to pay again. If you're still just not paying because you got protections for all those things, the next step now is we're going to start telling your customers that you've been hit. We're going to start hitting up the people who ordered from your website last week and say, hey, guess what? These people got attacked. I've got your information. You better reach out to them and tell them to pay, or else your identity is going to get stolen. It's going to be on you, not them. So that one's a tough one. And that's kind of cranking up there. I had some more stats on ransoms and kind of how this is progressing, but a lot of that's covered in the report that we discussed earlier. I got some different numbers, but let's just say they're huge, right? So, average ransom demand this year, according to one group, is $5.3 million. Now, that's the demand. That's not what's paid. The average payment is more like 570 or 570,000. So still a lot of money. But the reason these are increasing is not because of the dark web, like we talked about earlier, but it may be part of it. But you think about that, right? You've got 4 screws that these attackers can turn now, right? So there's 4 ways they can come at you. So your negotiating position is really drop it, right? You don't have as much leverage as you used to have. You used to be like, well, hey, I've got my backups, whatever, you guys can go pound sand, I'm not paying you. And then, just as these techniques escalate, those payments are going to keep going up because they've got more leverage on you. Nobody wants the reputational damage of their customers finding this out or potentially being impacted by it, things like that. So I threw in a couple of things to help here, right? But honestly, the biggest thing is stop it before it happens. Do your assessments, do your vulnerability scans, do your pen tests, do all of this stuff ahead of time. You don't want to find out about your vulnerability because it's been exploited. You want to find out about it before then. Same as with the plan. Have a good plan in place, have a good playbook in place, have all of this in place ahead of time so you can respond accordingly and you're not getting that ramped up pressure as you go. So, obviously, like we always talk about, good air gap backups for the encryption portion. If your data gets encrypted and that's all that happens and you've got an air gap backup, you're good. If you're going to restore, call somebody to investigate it, whether that's us or somebody else. Just investigate it to find out how they got in so they don't get back in again later, so you don't get re-ransomed again. Make sure you do that part, but you can at least restore your data. As far as the data theft and the extortion, same thing, right? Have a plan ahead of time, but also monitor your outbound traffic, right? You see 5 gigabytes of uploads coming from your accounting server, you might want to think, we've got a problem. And usually that's always going to happen before they actually ransom you. So you can hopefully see that if you got good monitoring there, people paying attention, good alerts.
Another thought there on that one too, Pink, sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
locking down, like we talk about, baselining your environment and knowing what sort of file sharing services you are using in your environment today and looking for anomalies like MegaSync. That's a popular one we've seen right now, but they've also extorted or exfilled using Google Drive, Dropbox, all those. Know what you use, monitor for deviations from that, and lock those down.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely that. And as like we've talked about a million times here lately too, default deny, right? I mean, if you don't need outbound FTP access, if you don't need outbound, FTPS or whatever else, deny that. You just stop. Just that. Yeah. You're going to knock a lot of that down.
That's an important point there, especially on the exfil, right? If your server's housing your important data don't have that untethered outbound access, it's going to be harder for that attacker to exfil that data. They're going to have to tunnel it through a device that does. So
yeah, it gives you more
buying time.
chances to see it
Yeah.
happen, that kind of thing, stop it in other places. Yep. So that's absolutely a huge one there. Moving on to the denial of service. This one is a little bit tricky. It's tough. Talk to your ISP, talk to your, your providers, see what kind of options they have to help you with that traffic when it comes in. That is always a tough one. I mean, places like Cloudflare, things like that, I'm not plugging them. I'm just saying they have these types of services to help disperse that traffic so that you're not getting hit by it. If you're not familiar, I mean, a denial of service is essentially just bombarding you with traffic so that you can't be accessed. If you want to think about it that way.
I would say look at your WAF technologies too. See if your WAF supports DOS protection.
Exactly. And then the harassment part, I mean, if you've made it this far, you're in trouble. If they've escalated to this point, you're already in trouble. It needed to have been stopped ahead of time. Maybe get a good PR firm on retainer or somebody you can call, that kind of thing. There's not a good technical solution there other than just stop it before it happens.
I would say too, get ahead of the curve, right? And that's something we tell people. Transparency and honesty are so important. I know that's part of our core beliefs here and how we operate, that we're always going to be honest and transparent. And I've been in situations like this before on the flip side, where we had that incident and we were quick to say, let's get out to all of our clients right away. So we're transparent. They're aware we had this and we're working to fix it. And also so they understand the possible implications. And so I think at that point, if you cover your basis right, you have already told your clients, you've been transparent with them so they understand that risk. And you know what? When they come up with the harassment, say, have at it, bro. Look at, what we were talking about with Accenture before, like they went public already. So how are they going to get harassed at this point? Control that narrative. The faster you get your message out, the more power you have to control that narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a great point here from Robert in the chat as well. Tabletop exercises before something happens, right? Test your plans, test your procedures, test everything, including your PR capabilities or your notification capabilities. But do that ahead of time. Don't test those in the middle of an attack. Find out your vulnerabilities ahead of time. Cool.
Thanks a lot, Pinky. Appreciate that. All right, I guess that's it. Happy Friday the 13th. Hopefully nothing too spooky happens. You guys have a good weekend. Bye, see you next month.
Thanks. See y'all. Bye.